All right, everyone, we'll get going in just a minute. Hope you had a good quick break. Time flies by. Okay, in an essence of timing, I will get going again. So this one's a quick exercise, and I'll let Frank sort of do a little bit of a setup, and we'll go into breakout sessions for about 10 minutes, and we'll come back and do a quick share back before we go into our final exercise of the day. So over to you, Frank.
Yes, thank you for coming back. There are 2 exercises left, and we want to be mindful of your time. So we promise to end this workshop at the hour that we promised. The first exercise is a smaller one. The second one is what I call in my language, the pièce de résistance. It's actually the main course. That's a long exercise, and that's where you can go all the way. Right? All your ideas, what we really need to do for the coast in Oregon. The first exercise is about attracting visitors. And we touched already a little bit by asking you what is a high value visitor for you. And many people were not trapped here and said, it's not only dollars, it's much more. But what we want to know here is, like we said, when we were reporting all the research done, you have the power, you have the key, you have the tools to communicate and to whom you communicate. So this is about inviting people, not saying that no, everybody's of course welcome, but you can prioritize. You can say, okay, we're gonna put focus on this kind of visitor. That's the one we really need for now. And maybe there are lower priorities, people you do not encourage. And if they're there, equally fine, they're very welcome. And this is how marketing works, right? So that's what we're gonna do in this small exercise. We're just gonna ask you questions about who are we gonna invite to the party, which is tourism in Oregon. Send us to the breakout rooms, Shannon. All right, everybody, here we're back. We only have 10 minutes, so I'm very curious about your thoughts. Who is it that we really need to focus on our efforts? What do we need to develop for whom? And who do we need to communicate to and to promote to? So start probably with the lower priority. And you touched already when you're talking about the high value visitor, right? And there were already some quotes we can use here. So who you think is your least priority? What kind of visitor is probably the one you're not gonna put focus on, the one you're not gonna prioritize? And I know that is the most difficult part to talk about, right? But it's also part of tourism.
I guess I can jump in, just get us started. I'm also not the marketing person on our team, so I also am not very confident about these questions, but I know on the Oregon coast, at least with our RDMO, we have a low priority for us has always been group tours. So like big tour buses, because a lot of our restaurants are actually too small to have like 50 people flooding in. And Jeremy and I both worked at the Pelican and saw The impacts of when 100 people came in, there weren't enough tables, there weren't enough servers. We don't have enough parking lots. Like even the beautiful scenic turnouts on Highway 101 aren't big enough for tour buses a lot of the time. So I know in the past, we have stayed out of like the Chinese market, although I think that's changing now. I think that they are traveling in smaller groups, but I guess that's just one way to start off the conversation is we've generally kind of stayed away from larger group tours in our organization.
Okay, yeah, point taken, larger groups. Jeremy.
Yeah, I think the answer might differ in different, areas of our coast, but certainly in the North Coast and a lot of the Central Coast, we don't need to attract visitors in the peak months. Summer months, we don't want to spend any effort marketing additional visitors. And then secondarily to that, I think day trippers. There are some day trippers that do leave a small footprint and maybe do patronize shops, restaurants, and such. But the day trippers, especially in certain congested areas like Pacific City, they'll come. They'll crowd the parks. They'll bring all of their things from the valley. They won't buy a single thing, maybe not even gas out here, and then they'll just turn around and go back. And so, I guess those would be my 2 points.
No, thank you for that, Jeremy. And it's so funny because you hear that a lot from coastal destination, like the day trippers. Is that really the ones we need to encourage? Bloemen, what are your thoughts here? You raised your hand as well.
I was just going to add to Erica's group tours, like down here, because we have Coos Bay, we would say we're not looking to draw in like cruise ships coming in, because same problem, same reason. None of our businesses are prepared for that sort of influx of traffic.
You know what I would add on to Jeremy's, I think that's great too, Bloom. What I would add to Jeremy's is, I think, yeah, as our role as destinations, maybe we don't want to attract those day trippers because of all the problems they bring. But there's like an equity issue as well for people that can't afford to eat at a restaurant. Lodging, especially on the North Coast, is incredibly expensive. So maybe an average family can afford to stay in our hotels or to go out to eat while they're here. And now, like in Pacific City, it costs $10 to even park anywhere. And so I think that we do have a little bit of an equity issue with our visitors. Like, yeah, we want rich people to come here and spend their money, but at the same time, this is the People's Coast. It's open to everybody. And I think that, and a lot of our rural communities aren't really wealthy people. And so maybe this isn't quite the conversation for that, but it's been something that we've been talking about too, is sort of the equity side of, why people are day trippers sometimes.
Yeah, thank you for that, Erica. And Jim's already made a nuance here, very subtle, that there are 2 types of day trippers. And Miles also added some information about large group tours, right? So there are also subtle differences there. And I think we all agree about that.
Yeah,
okay.
The comment I tried to make, Frank, was as opposed to large group tours, which I agree with the comments that were made, the capacity to host them is limited, but small group, high-end, interactive tours that are really examining and teaching people about the Oregon culture and its environment and engaging them meet a lot of the previously stated goals of longer stays and learning truly what the coast is and being responsible as visitors. And there's a need for both more product and specific marketing campaigns to get people to look for that in a stepwise process, because right now we don't have enough of either the market demand, which would automatically make it easy for a business, or there's not, people can't buy that experience very often. So I think that's a part of the mix that's missing in what's going on in the Oregon coast, because there's great state parks, low cost things to do for the kind of masses, but yeah, not the other way around.
Yeah, thank you, Miles. I think we agree it's about levels of motivation and engagement and being welcoming and equity. You're never going to say that Chinese people are not welcome. You're not going to do that, right? But if somebody from China really finds out, is motivated, plan their own trip, that's great because you select already about motivation. It's much more, if you do a generic campaign worldwide, then you attract another type of visitor when you really target people that has a passion for X or Y. It's more that way of thinking. No, great points. Who are we gonna invite then? What is your ideal visitor? What kind of passion do you want to share with these people? Or do you want him to have? What are the niches we have not been exploring? And I use the word myself, exploring, but you know what I mean, right? Where's the whole low-hanging fruit? Bloomer, thank you.
I would say our adventurous visitors, people that like to spend time outdoors and do so sustainably, people that are environmentally conscious and love the natural beauty of our coast and want to keep it that way.
Yeah, people that are environmentally conscious. So that requires another type of communication and promotion, right? You need to educate. Natalie.
I would add to that because I totally agree, but also the person who wants to then get to know the community and go into the town and eat at that restaurant. That equity issue is something I'm grappling with now. I hadn't really thought about that, but I do want the person who wants to not only enjoy our natural beauty, but also support our communities.
Yeah, absolutely. People that want to engage in communities. Good points. Yeah. Thank you for that. We still have 3 minutes, so some input.
I think also we have a really interesting seafood scene on the coast. And I know everyone's like, we have great seafood, and we do, but most of our restaurants aren't actually selling local seafood. So most of our seafood's coming from Washington and Alaska, Canada, because of just the way of like capitalism and seafood processing. But there are a few restaurants that have really fought against that and figured out how to start buying direct from fishermen. And so there's like some investments that we're trying to make in local seafood processing as well, so that because visitors think that they're eating local seafood and maybe we just don't really talk about it that much. But that visitor that is like really savvy, and there's like Portlandia, and I know it sounds super annoying for them to be like, well, what kind of life did this fish have? Was it massaged or whatever? But really having those consumers saying like, where's this fish from? Oh, it's not from here. Where's this fish from? Is it not from here? So that our businesses are like, okay, like there's a demand for local seafood. Like people won't stop talking about it. So there's also like that educated visitor that is demanding that local product when they're eating here.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I interviewed somebody in my research months ago from the coast, and they were offering tours with a maritime biologist that was explaining everything about the ecosystem of the sea and the food and so on. But you're right, Erica, this is not going to go away. Traceable food, locally produced, it becomes more and more important. If I look to my own children, it's yeah, absolutely. Okay, good point. We still have time. Yeah, Miles, you want to add something to that?
Yeah, just add, but I think Tom's hand was up already if he wants to jump in.
Yes, Tom, sorry, I overlooked you.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, I'm glad Erica mentioned seafood. One of our niches here in Waldport that we really promote is Dungeness crab. Dungeness crab is one of the finest seafood you can find on the planet. Now, I might be a little biased, but we have crabbing here year round. And someone talked about having more experiences. We have several individuals who do private, small group, crabbing, clamming experiences. That's one of our niches. And unfortunately, Waldport doesn't have a seafood market, but we do have a number of restaurants that specifically talk about their fresh seafood caught from the Alsea Bay or the ocean and the crabbing here. And I think that's really a great niche, and there's great crabbing up and down the entire coast. But when you ask what are some of our niches, definitely Dungeness crab.
Like that, I was going to add just that idea of the experiences. I think that could, maybe the balance of marketing could be modified slightly to, it seems to be heavily weighted to how people can do things on their own. And I think if we want them to look for experience engagements, workshops, kind of like the culture festival that's being promoted, that marketing has to reflect that too. So basically looking for facilitated experiences, guided experiences, and why that's valuable to a visitor, so that the businesses that are offering those can grow. I think that can accomplish some of the goals we've heard.
Yes, absolutely, Miles. And it doesn't, the one does not exclude the other. Like one of the most thriving projects in New York where I teach is during Black History Month, they launched, last year, they launched tours in North Queens where you can, with a local guide, someone from the BIPOC community, you can go around and then you look through the city through the eyes of somebody who lives there. And that's the same, right? So I would love to do that with a biologist. That Dungeness crab, is that a chef thing? Like, is that really high quality food, or is it something you eat everywhere and at every booth? Or pardon my ignorance, I'm just curious.
Tom is the crab guy. I can jump in though and just say it is a really big crab. So there's usually a lot of meat that comes with it. But under like commercial crabbing, we only usually get it during certain times of the year, and it's very expensive. It was like $14 a pound at one point last year. But if you get a permit for $10, you can get like 8 crab to yourself. So it's kind of, it's just an interesting system. It is delicious. Everybody wants it. They want it in their mac and cheese. They want it in pastas and omelets. But sometimes accessing it and like the fishing, like the commercial crabbing seasons can be really complicated and are becoming more complicated because of our warming ocean and the fact that now our crabs have really soft shells from ocean acidification. So seasons are getting shorter. The product is not always as high as it used to be. A lot of crab info there. Yeah.
Okay. Looking at time. Okay, we need to close the rooms. So let's go back to the main room, and then we come back shortly for the main exercise.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a good, quick discussion. We are going to do a very quick round the table with what was discussed in each of your breakouts before we go into our final exercise. So Rebecca, since you're back in the room first, why don't you go first? Oh, you're just in the
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we had a lot of great ideas for tier 3, but talking about tier 1 and sort of the low-hanging fruit, I mean, the people that are excited about the area, they pick up their garbage and then they go home and they talk to their friends and family. Those are the people that are likely going to help promote for us. It's that word of mouth that will bring or hopefully attract a similar kind of visitor that reflects our own passions here and that connection to place. And a great comment was made at the end by Carrie that the right matchup is important. So finding the right, identifying the people that are moved by the place. And also on tier 2, so it's basically the opposite. So people that portray characteristics indicating they don't care as much about the environment or are from Portland. And that's not to distinguish, but are not the ones that we want to actively try to attract. There was a lot of discussion about not necessarily needing to fill our hotels or trying to build more hotels during that June to September period, that that's when we get the most visitation. So, you know, focusing on the off season, but in a way that doesn't require a drain on utilities and staffing would be important. So we talked about, you know, maybe that's a role for Travel Oregon to, and for the other DMOs in the region to focus on off-season events. So storm watching, the ghost forest in NASCO, and then we talked a lot about, you know, trying to attract a more diverse type of visitors. So at the aquarium, we heard about $5 Wednesdays for the BIPOC community, which was a really great initiative. You know, perhaps there could be more active marketing to the Asian markets, that there's a feeling that the coast doesn't do enough to attract Korean, Chinese, and Japanese markets, where there's a large population in California and in Seattle. So more could be done on that. And then we talked about sport tourism, that in Astoria, for instance, since Seattle has a new NHL team, there's a lot of youth hockey going on in the area. So Astoria could potentially build a complex with an ice rink and an indoor sports pitch. I don't know if that's in planning at the moment, but it would help to attract some of that, the youth hockey market, and bring more people in the off season as well.
Great.
The soccer pitch is actually, I think, in planning. It's adding a ice rink.
Gotcha. Thanks, Bill.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you, Bill and Rebecca and team. William, what about your team?
Yeah, I can sum up our conversation in 2 words: infrastructure and mushrooms, but more about that soon. The first one in the unexplored category is to add more diversity in our visitors, but also in staff. That should really be a long-term goal. The recognition that of the importance of the drive market, which is Oregon and Washington, which is really, you know, current, but also, you know, opportunities to expand. But also when we think about international, you know, this is where infrastructure comes in, because it's hard, you know, to get to the coast, which also leads to, you know, some other ideas around also looking at extending stay beyond the weekend, but also non-car visitors. And in order to achieve that, there's maybe an opportunity for better transportation infrastructure, whether it's public infrastructure, trains, buses, which also means that you don't have to be super affluent to visit. Then we had a lot of conversation about, you know, which started with people that like to get their hands dirty. Maybe they forage or they catch their own crab, which really leads to some, you know, you need to be careful with that as well, because it can be extractive. And also there can be safety issues, like extractive if you don't know rules and regulations, safety if you pick the wrong mushrooms, it can kill you. So these things probably should be guided, but also probably limited, because, you know, if all of a sudden too many people go out and pick mushrooms, that can really set off the locals who consider that part of their lifestyle. Another one we talked about was volunteerism. People with a particular passion that come in and maybe they want to, you know, learn how to build trails and help build trails, and be part of that community while they visit. And that's the summary for my conversation.
Thanks, William. Great insights from the team. Frank, over to you.
Thank you, Shannon. In every workshop, you learn something new. That's why we love this job. So it's purple, It's called in Latin Metacorsinus cancer, and in English, the Dungeness crab. And we talked a lot about that. Guess that someone was in the crab business in my workshop. It is really interesting. So for the low priority, always the most difficult one to talk about. Group tours and big tour buses, and with subtle differences, like some very specialized tours is something we want to have. Day trippers, a bit the same. Some types of day trippers crowd the parks, don't buy anything. Maybe we should avoid them. But again, there may be an underlying equity issue here with this. So we landed at the level of engagement and the level of passion of people. And then the last one for low priority is probably the question, do we need to promote and attract visitors in the peak months because they're already coming, right? The soon to be very interesting is the environmentally conscious. The most things we talked about were about that. Those who like to spend time in nature outdoors, and how we're gonna attract them, right? So probably again about changing a bit our communication and weave in some educational parts. And then the long shot, the unexplored, is probably the seafood scene. Again, that's why I started with the crab. It's really something very special. I had an example of myself when I interviewed someone for my research about the coast, that you have very specialized experiences. You can go with a maritime biologist. That's great. But also what they said, traceable food, locally produced food, it's not gonna go away, right? This is gonna be very important in the future. And high quality, small interactive tour groups, learning in depth. That pretty sums it up, what I wanted to say. Great, great interaction. Thank you.
Yes, that is great, Frank. Great. Okay, so we're coming into the home stretch here. And our last exercise, which Frank will set up in a minute, is really from all this discussion, the vision, the visitor, etc. How do we make that all come true? How do we effectively create really tangible suggestions for product, promotion, etc. And we really want to hear your insights. Like Frank said at the beginning of the call, there are no bad answers. This has really helped us to understand your regional priorities in relation to the transformational strategy. So I'll turn it over to you, Frank.
Yeah, so we talked a lot about who you want to invite, but the pending question here is what needs to be true. How are we going to achieve that? And the point we want to make with this exercise is, okay, vision is great. Everybody had his saying, but it's not enough. We think that a strategy also is not a document that should be stowed away or hidden in a drawer. It's something that comes alive in people, in the people's mind. So what is a strategy without execution? So give us the tangible ideas. What is a low-hanging fruit? Give us ideas, actions to make all that become true. So what we're going to do is send you to breakout sessions. We will have more time. And all these actions, we're going to write them down in a special way. Some actions will be more social, some economical, some environmental. We believe that having talked about visitors, your sweet spot, and that's the same for everybody in Oregon, is the intersection between people that really respect the local people and want to engage with communities, people that add economic value, direct or indirectly, symbolic value, for instance, word of mouth, but also people that do respect nature and don't leave you behind with all the litter and all the troubles that come from that. So what needs to be true for product and promotion? For product, you can go broad if you want to. You have a definition yourself. What is a tourism product? Is it a walking tour? Is it something very specialized? Is it training for new guides? Is it training in DEI, how to welcome people? Is it infrastructure? So what kind of infrastructure? Is it policy? Is it grants? Is it programs that Travel Oregon needs to change for you? All these things we want to hear, and the same for promotion. What kind of communication do you need, right? That's what we're going to talk about in this last but most substantial session. And then if we have time, what are the priorities? What is very urgent and what is feasible or less feasible, right? Feasible like short-term, long-term, or this is going to cost a lot of money, so it's more less feasible. That's the thing. These are the things that we are going to discuss about. Let's go. Hi, everybody. Again, this is the last being together. So what we're going to do is share with you, and we call that a Jamboard. So a Jamboard, we're going to take notes, and we're going to take notes on, I think you call it stickies or Post-its. There are different ways, but that's what consultants do. They love to have a whiteboard and play around with these stickies. We want to hear ideas. Don't bother too much. Is this social, environmental, economical? We will do that even later. Just your ideas. What do we need to have more? What do we need to have new? That's what should come out of this last session together. And I get it, starting is difficult. You need to think about, but everybody has his background, right? Is it like my business needs this or my DMO needs this? All answers are good. If you have no time or you're shy or whatever, you can put stuff in the chat as well. We put them on the stickies as well. And if we don't have time, it's all recorded. So we go back and re-listen everything. Yes, is that clear to you? So we want to make it super simple. Yeah, Erica, you want to go first?
Well, no, I'm sorry, just to clarify.
Yeah.
So you want us to put social, environmental, and economical on this grid somewhere?
Yeah, ideas.
Frank, is this specific to attracting visitors, or is this what we need to do, in general, comprehensively?
Well, it's what you need to do, attract visitors, but you need to have experience that are beneficiary to locals and visitors. So it's a very good question, actually. Yeah, absolutely. It should be beneficiary for both. Where this is about tourism, but tourism is double-sided, as we discussed before. So very good point, Jeremy. Thank you for that. It's the general thing, actually, for both. All right, I see you thinking. Tom, you raised your hand first. So Tom, let's start with you. What are your ideas? What do we need to have more or less?
I think one of the things that I've experienced in having, excuse me, moved here from Portland 2 years ago is the opportunity for people to understand that you can work remotely.
Yeah.
There's a perception that, oh, gee, I go to the coast or I go anywhere in a rural area and I can't work remotely. In some cases, that's true. In many cases, it's not. And there are so many people who come here to both work and play. And with COVID, the remote work has increased dramatically. I think we could take advantage of that. What a beautiful place to be able to conduct your business, from the coast and do everything you need to do. And then when you're done working, you can go eat some Dungeness crab. So I just think that the message of infrastructure is one that has a little bit of high urgency.
Okay, right. Thank you. So Emily, you can move it to high urgency immediately. I just want to challenge all the others. Working remotely, I agree. Portugal really survived COVID-19 because all the IT workers from North Europe went to the coast of Portugal and saved the tourism businesses. That's a good example. A bad example is Aspen, Colorado, because they call that mountain fever and everybody went to Aspen, but these guys are very rich. I don't know, people from New York, LA, and now houses are unaffordable. So yeah, it's open for debate, but really good point. Thank you. Two other people raised their hands. Natalie, I knew I could count on you. Natalie?
Thank you. I will stay on the infrastructure theme, and I'd love to solve the problem that Erica mentioned, which is transportation, to make it easier for residents and visitors to travel to and through. First, to solve the transportation in general, and then to make it seamless would be really amazing.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, you hear that a lot. Is it there's just lacking stuff, or is it also it's not known enough? That's what I hear sometimes as well.
And it's not connected.
Okay, yeah, it's not aligned. Yeah. Okay. Great point. Is how urgent is this, Natalie?
Well, we have a sense of urgency. We've got an international track meet coming next summer. And so we were hoping to use that as a catalyst to solve problems. Yeah. So we have a little bit of sense of urgency. It's a long-term project, but the sooner it's solved, the sooner we change our environmental footprint, and all sorts of things are solved by solving transportation issues.
Okay, thank you. Great, yeah. And next was Jeremy.
Yeah, thank you. To echo what was just said, I think certain aspects of infrastructure and destination management are more urgent in certain areas than other areas. In the North Coast, I think it's more urgent. There's more congestion to find relief for. And there is more environmental impact just in the amount of travelers that are descending upon those destinations in certain times. But I would say, I guess, three things that are really important to find a place on this jam board is continued investment in infrastructure and destination management. Those two things. And there are some great efforts taking place now to do so in the North Coast, especially. We need to continue to focus on funding those efforts and gaining, continuing momentum there. And then the other is investment in off-season visitation. We could say shoulder and off-season visitation, but spreading it out.
Thank you. May I challenge you a little bit? What do you mean by destination management? Because that's broad. Some people earn their money, they're destination managers and do a lot of stuff. So how do you interpret that? What is the tangible actions we need to do under the umbrella of destination management?
That would include things such as, well, it ties to development of infrastructure. It means providing restrooms for visitors to use, parking opportunities that spread from congested areas and encourage use of other areas, includes trash management, includes public transportation options, many things like that.
Is trash really a problem over there?
Absolutely.
Okay. I see many heads nodding. That's maybe then it's a high priority, right?
Yes.
Trash management. Okay, thank you. All right, I see other hands. Oh no, this is Blumen again and Jeremy. I think you didn't lower your hands, right? Or are you back already?
I have my hand raised.
Okay, yes, please, go ahead.
I would say a high urgency, at least here on the South Coast, is more, we need more employees. We need people who want to staff our businesses. We're very short on that right now. And I think one of the biggest underlying issues is that there is not a lot of affordable housing for someone who makes a lower income. So it's kind of a dual issue there, right? Like if they can't afford to live here, how could they come and just be a waitress at a restaurant or a housekeeper at the hotel, you know?
I totally agree. I hear that all over the state. I hear that with all my other clients. What is your idea to solve it?
I think that we could be resourceful with the space that we have. We have a lot of open space. And if we could attract some developers to come in and build some tiny homes or even small apartment buildings in our open space that are affordable versus going after the richer clientele. Like, for example, here in Coos Bay, we just had one of our biggest buildings purchased recently, but he's going to turn it into a boutique boutique apartment building that will attract high income residents. So one of our largest buildings is already on path to attract higher income people, which is great for our businesses, but not if our businesses can't be staffed.
Yeah, thank you, Bloema. Do you see a role here for Travel Oregon? What can they do? Is it like
I think
lobbying?
attracting developers, maybe attracting developers that are interested in providing the low income housing, and then also attracting people of lower income or younger people to move to the state, visit the state and move to the state, because those are the ones that typically fill those jobs in most regions.
Yeah, totally. The advocacy, the need, the attractiveness of a job in tourism. Absolutely. Okay, thank you. Jim, you were next on my list.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of piggyback on the affordable housing.
Yeah, that's
it
great.
really needs to be handled carefully, because if you just do affordable housing and don't make it workforce housing, that ends up being retirees that take up all the affordable housing. So you're not really feeding into the workforce that way. So we learned that from a hotel down the coast that had affordable housing go next to it. The first year, all of their employees came in and did that, because employment is has seasonality to it. And once they left for the season, then all the retirees took that low income housing, and we lost the workforce housing that way. So we need to be careful with that. Then on a different note, if we talked about wanting to bring in ecological tourism and people that care about the environment, and I think we need to have more opportunities and education for people to learn what that is all about.
Yeah.
If you want to have people that care about our communities and keep them sustainable, then we need to educate them on how to do that from our perspective, because a tourist isn't going to know that, or somebody visiting is not going to know what that is. So we need to teach them. And I think we need to create opportunities where we can, or tours where we take them around and show them our communities, and really, this is how we take care of our community, and we hope you will join us in taking care of our community. So
Yeah, absolutely, Jim. And you can also manage that with your communication, right?
yeah.
Maybe some of you know the Greenland campaign, world famous. Why Greenland may not be for you. Now, this is shocking for tourism people. It's not, because it's with a sense of humor, and they explain, like, would you really consider to come to us? And then there's a long list of things you need to do. This is about motivation, right? But no, you're absolutely right. Okay, Erica, you're waiting already a long time.
Yeah, it's fine. I was just gonna say about workforce housing, you asked what's one of the solutions, and like I just love sharing this with non-Americans. One of our big problems is like our county zoning. So there's, like Bloom was saying, there's a lot of land, but you can't build houses on it because it's traditionally set aside for traditional industries, which makes sense. But here in Tillamook County, if I am an elderly woman living in a big house by myself, like I can't rent out my basement legally to someone else to live there. You can't have two households on one lot. If you have two houses, I know someone, there's just all these scenarios where like you legally just aren't allowed to use, there are houses that are sitting open, but because they're on the same lot together, you can't rent out a mother-in-law apartment to somebody else, at least in our county. So there's some outdated like zoning going on, which makes it very difficult for people to rent out rooms and secondary homes to workforce. And then, so there could be a role for advocacy there from, I don't know, Travel Oregon or Orla or someone to kind of say like, hey, this really needs to change. And it's different at every county level. And then another challenge with workforce housing is that everybody on the coast talks about it. Everybody wants it and complains about it. Nobody wants it in their backyard. Nobody wants it next to them. And I think there's an education component too, that people think that workforce housing is for like criminals or poor people or whatever bias they have. And so we have this weird cultural thing here where everyone's like, there's not enough housing. And they're like, okay, we're going to build it next to your house. Like, my God, not here. And they shut it down. So it's really complicated. And then I was just going to add, of course, climate action on this. And it would be high urgency, but between high feasibility and low feasibility, it's kind of in the middle. It's not really easy to get started in that. And a lot of tourism organizations are just starting to talk about it and try to figure out what they could do in that space. It would also kind of require DMOs to change their role. So instead of focusing on marketing, they might be getting community members together to say, we need a composter for all of our food waste. We need to work together to do this. And that's not traditionally what we do. So for feasibility, I'm not really sure where to put that, but I think there is certainly a high urgency for that.
I think it's quite feasible. Well, some stuff is feasible, right? Some stuff is more for the long term. And Emily, the affordable housing, I think it's over urgent, but it's the feasibility is more on the lower side. But I think what Travel Oregon can do is really lobbying, probably with other DMOs from other states, because this is even a federal thing, right? Yeah, thank you. Natalie.
You. I'd like to dig into the product development a little bit. I love the food trails, and I would love to see that, what kind of the next phase is for that. It accomplishes a lot of things for me. It stitches together the experience, the love of local, the love of the earth, along with the emotional experience that you get by seeing it and feeling it. I think that what's happened is that in our area in particular, when we developed ours, our product was high on the restaurant end and not on the see where it's grown. And you don't create the same love for it unless you get that entire piece. So I would love to see how we can kind of help the businesses at the other points along that continuum to develop product that could be then marketed. And then I'm wondering, is there a way to do that with outdoor recreation? You know, we've got the dunes and they need to be preserved. Is there a way that we can develop comparable products that kind of show you what is happening, educate you, and then let you kind of experience it yourself? So I think that is something that I'm interested in. I'm also interested in accessibility. I went to a session not too long ago that talked about kind of this great opportunity we have for all of the people who have disabilities who are eager to travel. And there are some big things that can happen, but there are also some really little, very highly impactful changes that you can make at a hotel or at a restaurant that just make it a little bit easier for a person with a disability to travel. And that just takes a little bit of education and a little bit of thought and love.
Yeah, absolutely. Take away the thresholds, even literally. Thank you. Last comment is for Bloemen, but I need a volunteer to present this. The last one is not something I'm going to do myself. And normally volunteer someone. Erica, you feel already me coming. As you were acting as a co-host in the beginning, please would you be so kind to tell what we have. You should not read every post, but just in general where the discussion went. I think there was good stuff. Thank you. And Bloemen, yeah, the last comment is for you. And then we need to go back to the main room already.
Going to say what Natalie said at the end is some simple accessibility issues could be resolved pretty feasibly by just adding larger parking, like a larger designated parking spot at some of our trailheads, some ramps, you know.
Yeah.
There's several things that we could do, that we could probably create. I'd love to see, Travel Oregon was mentioning that they're working on an electric vehicle route on the 101 and the 5 during our last conference. And I would love to see them make an accessibility route on our coast a priority.
Oh, yeah, that's a very clear one. Hey, the accessibility thing, how urgent and how feasible you think it is, Bloemen?
Urgent, and I think most of the initial changes are highly feasible. I think, of course, down the line, once we think about all ADA and specific special needs, we might go into the lower feasibility, and it might take a little bit more time. But I think there are a lot of small changes we could make that would be really impactful.
And I think I'd add on the high urgency that it's always been really important, but in the last 2 years, there's been so much diversity, equity, and inclusion training and conversations that it's really high priority for a lot of organizations. So it's like the time is ripe really to make those investments and not be like, well, should we do this or this? Like people want to make those investments and want to be proactive. So that I think the timing is also really perfect for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tom added market to the retired traveler and elderly. Yeah, absolutely. People that are a bit averse to technology. Yeah, I agree. But that also goes with accessibility for some part. The food trails, Natalie, how urgent and how feasible is that? Is that short term, long term, and is that
I think it's short term and it's really easy.
Okay.
No, parts of it are really easy. Finding ways for people who are really developing products to open their businesses up in a way that's accessible is probably pretty hard.
Okay.
But there are other elements to just see it happening that might be easier.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. And the specific data supporting the economic and social impact. Is Travel Oregon not providing them already, or how does it work? No, you say no.
Providing the economic impact of tourism.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of. So there are, these quarterly reports, but I would say they're not always accurate, and they don't always, it's difficult. It's not easy to read, and it's not very straightforward. But there is data there, but it's not all inclusive, and could probably be improved. I'm sure Natalie could speak to this too.
And are they specific for your region? Like they do that general for the state? Can they pull out for this region, or is that not happening?
Yeah, they do. They do for the Oregon coast, and also by
right. Yeah. So yeah, that seems quite feasible and not so unimportant. Okay, thank you. Tom, you wanted to say something as last closing remarks?
Yeah, let's see if
Tom, you're still there?
Yeah, I had to unmute. I just wanted to clarify my chat point about STRs. Lincoln County has a very aggressive ballot measure coming up to completely ban and phase out all STRs in the next 5 years. And my comment was specific to what Erica kind of just said. there needs to be more specific data supporting the economic and social impact of registered and licensed STRs. There's a lot of chat out there. There's a lot of noise out there, especially on social media on both sides. But I think it's incumbent upon perhaps Travel Oregon to help get that message out and to show the economic impact and the importance that STRs have to the visitor experience.
Okay, thank you. We have to leave the breakout room. So let's go back, Emily, to the main room. Hi, Shannon.
Welcome back. All right, the rest of the team will join us in a minute. Yep, we have everyone back. All right, Frank, do you want to go first since you're back in the room?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Erica was so helpful today to help me out, especially in the beginning. So Erica, I volunteered her, to be honest, but please can you share what we have been talking about in our breakout session?
Yeah, hi everyone. So as you can see, there was really nothing in low urgency. And to the Destination Think team, that's why this is going to be the best regional workshop that you do, and just the diversity of people that are here and the motivation that our region has. So you can call it quits after this. But that being said, yeah, so all of our stuff ended up being in high urgency and a lot of it in high feasibility as well. As you can see, sort of on the left, we're talking about workforce housing. So both, you know, a lot of things with that, but attracting developers that would want to create that workforce housing, but also a need to change zoning in our different counties. And we have 7 coastal counties, so it's very complicated, the different rules for each, but being able to rent out that mother-in-law suite or a room in your house. And also attracting workforce as well. Like we mentioned, or at least was mentioned in our group, a lot of the Oregon coast is retired. So there's a need for attracting workforce. So that's kind of a big systems change. And then we talked a little bit more about destination development and management. So creating those investments that bring better parking and facilities, trash management, bathrooms, transportation would make things better for both residents and visitors to our region. And then other sort of investments, of course, in climate action, which will affect a lot of the things that we've talked about today. We'll look at the role of DMOs and businesses be in this, and it is high urgency and possibly high feasibility if we get ourselves aligned and organized together. Talking about food trails as a product. So how can we, this is really incredible program that we have in Oregon. I'm sure it's come up in a lot of the different workshops. How do we take that the next step further and continue developing that program and supporting businesses that are part of that? And then we kind of wrapped up our conversation talking about accessibility. The Oregon coast is really known for our outdoor recreation. So how can we make it accessible to everyone? And although it's always been this really important thing, I think in the past 2 years, diversity, equity, and inclusion are all at the forefront of conversations and investments, and organizations want to be supportive of that work. So the time is also ripe to create those types of those products. And then we talked a little bit about understanding the economic and social impact of, in this sticky note, STRs, but also tourism in general, and being able to communicate that story. So is there anything I missed, Frank or team?
No, this was awesome. Thank you so much, Erica. Anybody else? Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Really great insights. Thank you. William, what about your team?
Sure. I volunteered Julie. So she is going to walk you through it. And I zoomed in a little bit for you, Julie.
Thank you. So one of the overriding things we talked about was kind of branding the coast, or perhaps one of the three areas of the coast to align with our values. So it would be talking about things like the climate crisis, sustainability, you know, those types of things. And so that we would really be attractive to the people who we want to come visit, who are like-minded, and the people who aren't interested in living that type of lifestyle, you know, perhaps may not want to visit. We talked about, you know, walking the talk, and if you build it, they will come. And that's having electric car chargers. It's one thing I said, I saw something recently on the news about a hotel that gave each room a certain amount of energy was allotted. And if they exceeded that, then they had a charge, and they had a monitor in the room. And then also perhaps giving people some incentives if they drove down here in an electric car, or if they you know, did this or that. We talked about about food trucks and the difference that different cities have and how they can do business, or if they can do business, and how that could attract a more diverse group of people, and it could bring a different type of food, different ethnicity. We talked about trail development, not only for walking trails, but a bike ride, you know, trails. And we could attract another group of travelers if we offered that as an activity for people. Yeah, we talked about one thing that is pretty shocking, is that a lot of our best seafood gets shipped out, and it's hard to even purchase it in some areas of the coast. And so when someone who is visiting says, where's the best place to buy fresh crab, or, you know, sometimes we don't have a place for them. And in some restaurants, they aren't even serving our local catch, and that needs to change. That's a big problem. We talked about increasing public transportation, things like Lyft or Uber, but also perhaps having like a tram, that if you've been to other cities, you can jump on and off. So you can leave your car at the hotel and you can take the tram, and either it's free and it's subsidized by someone or something, or it's a small fee and you can ride it all day and jump on and off, and it usually stops at touristy destinations. Let's see. Create car-free zones. So like Baltimore, when they were developing their harbor, they created areas that were very walkable, and created a car-free zone. So once you get down on the waterfront, you're not interacting with cars, they're not in your way. It's a positive experience.
Yeah, I think you summarized it well, Julie. I also want to make sure that people don't think that Celebrate Local Hispanic Community was the lowest on the priority. We just ran out of room. So I'm just going to hand it back to Shannon.
Thanks, William. Yes, thanks, Julie. That was a really good recap. Again, we're capturing all of these insights and notes. So our team is going to be busy for the next few weeks, soaking this all in. Last but not least, what about yourself, your group, Rebecca?
Thanks, Shannon. Stephen was voluntold in our group.
Thanks, Stephen.
So hopefully
I have a hard time saying no, I guess. I think what strikes me after listening to the other two is that, you know, we did struggle a little bit with what was the feasibility, and part of the work that I do is help with strategic planning and SWOT analyses, and those are divided up partly into what internally things that we can control, and externally those things that we cannot control. And as I was listening to how people put these into the feasibility, I think that's what we were really struggling with, is the less control we can have of a situation, the bigger the problem, the lower the feasibility on it. And there was also a comment that was made that was like, if it was feasible, it would have been done already. And that was specific to kayak, paddleboard, boat rentals. I'm going to go back and piggyback a little bit on what Erica said with really taking advantage. This is a very right moment to work with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And one thing that that is very feasible would be to reach out, as it sounds like you did, to Native groups, but to reach out to a broader array of groups to get their feedback and compensate them for their time, because often they are not in jobs like we are, that they can sit in on a meeting like this. And so that compensation is really important, and work with them on what programming would look like for them, and what better access would look like for them, as opposed to trying to create it for them. So, and when we look at the people on this group here, there isn't a lot of diversity. So, especially in terms of race and ethnicity and that sort of thing. But the other piece is the utilizing the environment that's existing to help promote mountain biking, and that's a hot one right now, and grants can be or assistance can be given to that for development and maintenance. Same thing with hiking and overland trails, utilizing the forest roads that are already there, whether they be for logging or that are owned by the Forest Service. Promoting organizations collectively that have a mission related to environmental consciousness. I see this as something that we can do internally as well, because it's really about looking and identifying those different organizations and pulling them together. Working with younger groups, I think that's such an excellent idea, because that's really key to sustainability, is get people involved at younger ages. There was some back and forth about how feasible that is. Then improved biking trail along Highway 101. It's dangerous. We see numerous deaths. And that is really working with ODOT. That is low feasibility because of the cost, and because that really is outside of what we can do directly. Yet there's also an opportunity to grow cycling tourism, supporting campgrounds and looking at that specifically. Then these other pieces, we didn't quite get to sticking them into the low and high feasibility, but infrastructure for people with accessibility issues, I would put that as a high urgency, yet I'm not so sure about the feasibility of that, because that does cost money, but I would like to see that as being feasible and prioritized for spending. And I'm making this up as I go. By the way, I'm speaking for myself, perhaps, and not the team. So because we didn't get there. And then grants to help, small grants to help revenue generating options with small attractions. I think that is definitely for local businesses. That's both high feasibility and high urgency. And perhaps part of that would be helping those organizations write successful grants. Better partnerships for financial support in state parks, right? So we haven't discussed state parks, at least in our breakout groups at all. And they, as big land managers, they can control a lot, but they seem to be short on funds chronically, and they are in charge of the trails a lot and parking and whatnot. So I think that while that is outside, that is probably high urgency, but a little bit lower on the feasibility spectrum. And then promoting organizations that have a mission focused on cultural differences. Yeah, I mean, I think that goes back to what we talked about earlier with reaching out to more diverse groups. That's high feasibility and high urgency. And reducing silos, small tourism organizations having common visions and goals.
I can't put them all in the top, but I think you did an excellent job. Thank you so much, Stephen.
Thanks, everyone. All right, I know that we're just at time, so if you have to drop off, no worries. We just wanted to simply share with you where we go from here. Everyone see a screen? Yeah, I hope so. Okay.
Yep.
Yep. Okay, good. So Frank did a quick recap on where we've been to date with our project and the strategic process for the transformational strategy. Here's sort of the overlaying with the timeline and the key stages of our process. So as we said, we have done a lot of engagement over the last 10 months. And over the next couple months, we will be distilling all of the learnings from these workshops, reevaluating the destination assessment that we put together, consulting with Travel Oregon's racial equity impact consultant to ensure that we're looking at the transformational strategy through the lens of racial equity itself. So really from there, we'll develop a high-level framework to present to Travel Oregon to ensure that we're all aligned on the high-level direction. And from there, we will be developing the 4-year transformational strategy and organizational design with the goal to present that in January, February. From there, we do have some time built with Travel Oregon to help them start implementing the transformational strategy. So working with them in some key sessions and consultation to outline sort of the immediate priorities to drive the transformational strategy forward, and really working with the individual regions and yourself to make that change. So that is a quick recap on where we go from here. On behalf of the Destination Think Team, I do want to thank you again for all your participation today. It has been truly valuable for us. I've been hearing from the team throughout the call that it's been such a good discussion with each and every one of you. So thank you again for all of your valuable insights. Hope you all have a great rest of your day. And if you have any questions or additional thoughts, feel free to send a note out to Staj at Travel Oregon or myself and Emily, and we would be happy to gather that as we summarize all of these amazing insights. So thank you again. Hope you have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Everyone.
Thank you so much.
Take care.